All right, we are now. Nick, I
Good
will
morning,
press it over to you.
everyone. My name is Nick Bates, and I would like to welcome everybody to the Ohio Council of Churches' first Ohio State Legislative Update webinar. I serve on the Council's Justice and Advocacy Commission on behalf of the ELCA's Southern Ohio Synod. And just so everybody knows, this is our first attempt at one of these webinars, so please bear with us as we work through any final kinks and errors that we may have today. But hopefully we won't have any, and please judge us with grace as we move forward. So today we are going to hear on 3 state issues. First we'll hear about the environment, and then we are going to hear about human trafficking, and finally on the death penalty. After our 3 speakers, everybody will have an opportunity to participate by asking questions by either raising your hand or by typing a question into the box. As part of the mission of the Ohio Council of Churches, we work to reclaim our prophetic heritage, boldly speaking truth to power, and courageously proclaiming justice for all people. Our mandate to bear public witness is solidly rooted in Scripture and is an essential part of our call as disciples to do justice, love mercy, and to walk humbly. Our choice is not whether to engage in prophetic social witness, but rather of when and how to engage most effectively. To advocate justice is our moral responsibility, empowered by the good news of God's love for all. Scripture calls us to love God and our neighbors with all of our strengths and gifts. One of those gifts is our voice to call out injustices that exist in the world and identify community solutions to community problems. We speak and act for justice to reach out to the stranger and foreigner, respond to the needs of the poor and the disabled and the oppressed, and to serve the most vulnerable among us. So today we'll hear from 3 state leaders. First, we'll hear from Sarah Ward with Ohio Interfaith Power and Light to discuss environmental issues, followed by Jim Tobin with the Ohio Catholic Conference of Bishops, who will discuss the death penalty, and Tom Smith, the Advocacy Director at the Ohio Council of Churches, to discuss current efforts to combat human trafficking. So first up will be Sarah Ward. She is the Executive Director of the Ohio Interfaith Power and Light, a program of the Ohio Council of Churches designed to empower religious response to climate change and to promote energy conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. They focus on tangible results in religious communities, putting faith into action. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Nick. I don't know if anybody else is hearing all of the background noise. Hopefully that's not coming from my side. Are you able to hear better now? I hope so. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about the work of Ohio Interfaith Power and Light around the state of Ohio, and in particular in the public square, in our efforts to be advocates for caring for God's creation, both at the state level and at the federal level. I'm the director, and I'm pleased to say that we are a project of the Ohio Council of Churches here in the state of Ohio, and we are also part of a national effort with a total of 40 states around the country participating. This map gives you a real clear picture of all of the states that are a part of the Interfaith Power and Light National Initiative. All of these states within this network are committed to working with programs that promote energy conservation, renewable energy, and energy efficiency, as well as educating their faith community members about ways to be better stewards to address climate change. Our common mission to be faithful stewards of creation by responding to climate change through these efforts of energy conservation, efficiency, and renewables is a direct result of the knowledge that human beings are responsible for the most dangerous shift in global climate since the beginning of recorded history. Global climate change is real. In 2012, we recorded the warmest year on record for the continental United States, and in January of 2014 was Earth's fourth warmest January recorded. It's important to know that the scientific community is just reporting the facts, and 98% of the global scientific community confirms this data. This is not a belief system, it is just what it is. Carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels remains in the atmosphere for decades to millennia, and fossil fuel-based energy use continues to grow not only globally, but also here in Ohio. So just to give you a picture of where Ohio gets its energy, and when we're talking about producing energy, we're talking about various forms that are the source for producing electricity in Ohio. We use nearly 70% coal-based electric generation, and that's the largest section of this pie chart. Next, with around 11%, is nuclear energy, and then 9% natural gas. The two very small slivers represent approximately 1% from renewable sources such as wind and solar, as well as small hydro, and then also fuel oil, which is used in more rural parts of the state. Ohio is an extremely high electricity consumer. There are only 17 nations in the world that use more electricity than Ohio uses annually. And this is due to our large manufacturing base, which obviously is important to our economy as we employ so many people through manufacturing. But unfortunately, we're also a national leader in sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, NOx, mercury, and other toxic air emissions. It's also important to note that from coal mining, we end up destroying our beautiful landscape through mountaintop removal, longwall, and strip mining. In order to begin to address these issues and these concerns, in 2008, Ohio's landmark clean energy legislation was enacted, called Senate Bill 221. This piece of legislation requires that electric utilities generate 12.5% of their electricity sales from renewable energy sources, and enacted efficiency programs to reduce energy consumption by 22% by the year 2025. The law has a pro-consumer cost cap to protect ratepayers and to ensure the benefits of the program outweigh the costs. As a result of the implementation of this in the last 5 years, we have increased the diversity in our electricity portfolio with renewable energy projects of over 1,000 statewide. And since 2009, we've deployed about 900,000 megawatts of installed renewable energy capacity as a hedge against anticipated energy price increases. On the energy efficiency side of the equation, for every $1 invested in energy efficiency in Ohio, ratepayers save $3 on their utility bills. These programs create jobs. Over 25,000 Ohioans are employed by the clean energy sector, with over 400 companies, and many of these in the wind energy manufacturing supply chain. I apologize for that background noise. Ohio Interfaith Power Light advocates for strong state policy. Senate Bill 221 was established in 2008 and is helping Ohioans to save millions of dollars on their electric bills. More specifically, however, thanks to Senate Bill 221, Ohio law provides financial assistance for houses of worship to reduce their energy use. faith community are customers of the electric industry as well. And we are currently helping 21 houses of worship to measure their energy use through engineering-grade energy audits, as well as reduce their energy use through rebates and financial assistance. It costs less for Ohio's electric utilities to invest in energy efficiency for their customers than it does to build new capacity, particularly new fossil fuel-based capacity. Just to give you an example of how this assistance has benefited the faith community in Ohio, this is Worthington United Methodist Church. Worthington was able to receive an engineering-grade facility-wide energy audit valued at over $9,000 at no cost to them. The audit was paid for partially by Columbia Gas of Ohio and American Electric Power, their two energy providers. The audit identified solutions to their heating system needs, and their combined rebate from both AEP and Columbia Gas paid nearly 1/3 the cost of a new high-efficiency boiler system. The projections for the reduced operating costs for this boiler system are significant, at $20,000 per year over the operating life of the equipment. So as you can see, this new system for heating this facility cost the members of the congregation about $230,000, but it will save the members of that congregation annually on their utility bills in the neighborhood of $20,000, freeing up funds for them to use in other ministries within their congregation. The problem is Ohio's clean energy law is currently in jeopardy. Over the last several years, several pieces of legislation have been proposed to either repeal the law entirely or to repeal the renewable goals in the current law. The most significant concern in front of us today is Senate Bill 58, which introduces significant changes to weaken and threaten current law. Senate Bill 58 was proposed in late 2012 through lame duck session at the urging of First Energy, which one of our largest utilities in the northern part of the state. The changes that they were recommended were primarily to benefit the utility position with their shareholders, but also the large industrial energy users. Unfortunately, it's not a very significant benefit from the perspective of small use consumers like residential and small commercial, which is what most congregations are categorized as. The economic and environmental effects of this change would essentially raise the annual electricity bills for Ohioans, decrease jobs and economic competitiveness, and also result in detriments to the environment because we will continue to burn fossil fuels at a very high rate. AARP recently said this bill is bad for consumers. So while we've been successful in putting off the passage of Senate Bill 58, there have been new activities emerging in the Ohio State House, and it's important for the faith community to begin to reach out to your elected officials to tell them that you want to support and maintain Ohio's clean energy law. What's currently happening is a move within the General Assembly during the midterm budget process to freeze these standards. Essentially, freezing the standards will eliminate the utilities making new investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So it's important that this act not take place. In addition to advocating at the state level, Ohio Interfaith Power and Light works to advocate for public policies that address climate change, defend clean air, and move towards more efficiency and renewable energy sources. We are a part of the Clean Air Act Defense Coalition in Ohio. We provide information about public policies through our electronic newsletter and action alerts. If you're interested in being a part of an advocacy working group, please let us know. So advocating for strong federal policy is carried out currently through supporting the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in using its authority, which was granted under the Federal Clean Air Act, Section 111, and upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, to set standards for industrial carbon pollution from power plants, which threatens public health. Power plants account for about 40% of the carbon pollution in the United States. Setting sensible carbon pollution standards for new and existing power plants makes sense and is the right thing to do. However, there are allies in Congress that are sponsoring what's called the Pollution Protection Act to protect the profits of their biggest donors, the fossil fuel industry. And these are polluters that are essentially still in denial about climate change and working to try to block the actions of the US EPA. Inaction on the carbon pollution that fuels climate change puts ours and our children's health at risk and ensures that extreme weather events like Superstorm Sandy will get worse and more common. A small minority in Congress should not be able to block Clean Air Act safeguards that protect public health simply because they deny the overwhelming judgment of science. There are many ways to engage in advocacy in Ohio, and Ohio IPL wants to support your efforts. Here are just a few of the ways that you can get involved. Write letters to your elected officials in your own districts, whether it be at the state level or at the congressional level. Or submit letters to the editor of your local media. Be involved in hosting meetings within your district, or coming to the State House, or going to Washington to meet with your elected officials in one-on-one meetings, so that you can talk to them about your perspective as a person of faith on these issues. Open doors. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your family, talk to your friends about these issues, and see if you can help collect letters of support. Or make phone calls. You can call any day during the working week and speak with representatives in your elected official's office, both in Congress and at the State House. This year, Ohio Interfaith Power and Light has participated in something called the Teach In, Preach In, and Act on Climate. Every January through April, we focus our efforts on advocating for clean air energy policies at the state and federal level. Throughout the year, we also offer regionally based trainings and easy-to-follow webinars to help inform, train, and support Ohio's faith community. Our goal is to help you become effective leaders in reaching out to your elected officials and letting them know how important good policy is to helping the poor and marginalized, to improving public health, and protecting God's creation. In January, we held the Teach-In. Partnering with Bird Polar Science, we held an electronic webinar that essentially connected the science community with leaders in the faith community to teach them about the most current science affecting Ohio on issues around climate change. In February, faith communities around the state participated in the National Preach-In, which is always held on Valentine's Day weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Faith leaders preached from the pulpit with their own messages about our importance to lead as people of faith on issues around climate change. In March, we held our first State of the Climate address at the State House just last week, Again, co-hosted by Interfaith Power and Light, OSU's Bird Polar Research Center, and as well supported by the Ohio Council of Churches, the Catholic Conference, and many other faith groups to reach out to our elected officials. Further, in April, we will be reaching out to elected officials with in-district meetings, which will be invitational events for elected officials in your faith communities to come to see what your community is doing to combat climate change, whether it's local foods and community gardens, or perhaps installing efficiency in your facilities. Ohio Interfaith Power and Light offers trainings throughout the year on how to advocate from a faith-based perspective, and these trainings are offered both regionally and through webinars. This is just a representation of last week's event at the State House. It was very well attended. You can engage in advocacy by writing letters to the editor of local newspapers, and in this case, timely responses are important. And we can help teach you on how to be involved in these kinds of rapid response efforts. You can send letters to elected officials about legislation, emphasizing your faith-based perspective. You can make phone calls and face-to-face visits to your elected officials as a group or through organized lobby days of action. Or you can host in-district events. Invite your elected officials to your house of worship to see how you are acting on your call to be stewards of God's creation in your own community. I appreciate having the time to meet with you today, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation. But just to give you contact information for following up with Ohio Interfaith Power and Light, our volunteer coordinator, Deb Steele, is available at this email address, dsteele, S-T-E-E-L-E, @ohipl.org. You can also sign up to receive electronic action alerts and learn more through our website and our electronic e-news. And anytime you'd like to reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to work with you. And my contact email is sward@ohipl.org. Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Tom Smith, legislative advocate with the Ohio Council of Churches. I'll let Tom say anything more that he needs to in terms of his introduction. Tom, we're unable to hear you. I think we probably need to go to Jim while you work on the your audio. Jim, can you come online? And we can go with your presentation, Jim, while Tom is working on his audio.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Can we pull? Oh, look at there they are. I noticed that Howard Tolley, you're on, and David McCoy, you're on. It's great. Actually, both of you could be giving this presentation. So, can you hear me? Okay, everybody can hear me? Okay. So I'm Jim Tobin. I'm an associate director with the Catholic Conference of Ohio, and as many of you know, I've been doing some legislative work with the Catholic Church for I'm on my 37th year now. So I am one of the original founders of Ohioans to Stop Executions. Okay. Now, what I thought we could do is talk briefly about some of the difficulties that we know are there with regards to ending the death penalty. I want to share some good news. I want to talk about the situation in Ohio briefly and link to a few resources. Okay, I think we all know that the death penalty issue is difficult and divisive within the community, and I know that there's at least three aspects of this. One is emotionally, second is spiritually, and the third is politically. Emotionally, When we did a few years back, we did some focus groups to try to see whether Ohio was ready to do a ballot initiative to get rid of the death penalty. And the two issues that surfaced most in the focus groups that were going to be the hardest was that there was always a terrible situation that they would focus on, that what about this particular crime? And then the second piece was, well, what if it was someone that you loved? As we come through and as we talk about it, and when we get to the good news, I do think that the fact that a group called Murder Victim Families for the Reconciliation has really advanced this cause, because they could say this did happen to me, and I do not want or need the death penalty. Spiritually, I think we know, while most of the faith communities that we're involved with have a long history of opposing the death penalty, we do know that a lot of people are using a faith perspective to support the death penalty. There's been lots written. We know that there's lots of arguments with regards to refuting and some very specific studies, whether you're coming from a Christian perspective or whether you're coming from a Jewish perspective, or actually most of the mainline churches. What is problematic is that when we survey, the people of faith generally have similar views, as does the society at large with regards to the death penalty. So we know we continue to struggle to how do we get our message communicated. Politically, it's no surprise to those of you on this call that right now in the Ohio General Assembly we do not have enough votes to end the death penalty. Now, let's jump over to some good news. I think the winds are changing. And some of you are familiar with Jim Wallace. Jim Wallace would come in and says, you know what, our biggest job is to be wind changers. When the winds aren't going in our direction, how do we get the wind moving? And so his quote here is apropos. You change society by changing the wind. Change the wind, transform the debate, recast the discussion, alter the context in which political discussions are being made, and you will change the outcome. You will be surprised at how fast the politicians adjust to the change in the wind. So, 4 aspects to this. It is good news that public support for the death penalty is weakening. There is a greater awareness of the problems associated with executions. We have better education and stronger advocacy efforts. And I think there is, at least politically in Ohio and around the country, a growing acceptance of at least some incremental legislative changes, which I'll mention in a minute here. Best news, again, is a 2014 Ohio poll said that when offered alternatives to the death penalty, we could get up to around 48%. And that would support some sort of eliminating the death penalty. And only 47% preferred the death penalty. So we keep building on that. As you know, when most people ask the poll, are you in favor or not in favor of the death penalty? Well, we do get a lot of people that say, I'm in favor of the death penalty. But when you ask them, well, what if there's an alternative? What if we keep them in prison for the rest of their lives? Or what if we deal with prison and restitution? And that's where we get the higher numbers coming in. Okay, nationwide, as you can see on this chart, there were 39 executions in 9 states in 2013, which is a decline. We're seeing a decline in that. We're seeing a decline in the number of persons that are sentenced to death penalty. We're seeing the public support going to lows, record lows again. And we're pleased that we've had some inroad, like with Maryland becoming the 6th state in 6 years to abandon the death penalty. Would it not be great if we could be the 7th state? Okay, I think all of us have done a better job of addressing the issues, and once you move beyond some of the moral arguments, which are I think again remain very powerful, we do know that these following issues have been helpful to lessen the support for the death penalty. Innocence, race disparity, geographic disparity, cost, and we've had some recent problems with lethal injection. So you can read some of those things. Those are issues that I know most of you are very, very familiar with, and we continue to focus on all of those, and together they make a more compelling case, whereas any one of them may not stand directly on its own. Together, we're building a stronger case. Cost factors, we've always been dancing around with how much does the death penalty cost in Ohio. We're still waiting for a couple good studies, although we just did have Dayton Daily News put together this piece that was talking about the average cost of being around $3 million in Ohio versus $1 million for life without parole. And you'll see that we continue to try to focus on things that we could do better with the savings if we did not have the death penalty in Ohio. So, continuing with our good news, we do have better education and stronger advocacy efforts. I think each of you, everyone here, is very much aware that Ohioans to Stop Execution has been able to have some staffing for a while, and the materials that they're producing and the programs is exciting. We're being much more effective around the state. I mentioned the Murder Victim Families for Reconciliation. There is a group that's available in Ohio that can talk about, hey, this did happen to me, and we do not need the death penalty. And finally, the greatest resource perhaps is the Death Penalty Information Center, and you can link to that, and it will give you pretty much more details than you ever want to know. Now, I do think that that we do have some incremental support for some changes here, and I do know that my organization, the Catholic Conference of Ohio, is going to pursue what the legislature will give us right now, and we do think that issues related to broader use of DNA evidence, access to effective counsel, efforts to address unfairness and injustice are helpful. And you'll see here in a minute that the task force at the Supreme Court of Ohio has just finished. We'll have some recommendations regarding not having the death penalty for persons with serious mental illness. So I think all of you are familiar with a couple of the folks, and I sort of focused on a number of higher known Republicans, moderates, that have spoken out against the death penalty, including 3 Supreme Court justices at one time: Justice Pfeiffer, Justice Stratton, and Justice O'Neill. Some folks from the Department of Corrections that actually ran our prisons, and Terry Collins and Reggie Wilkinson, and a couple of folks that have, Jim Petra was, of course, an attorney general, and Julia Bates is a prime prosecutor. So we're pleased to see that there are a number of people that are saying, hey, we can end the death penalty. As I mentioned, the Supreme Court has come up with some recommendations that actually are expected to be released on April 10th. So what's the situation in Ohio? Let's deal with, for a minute, death row and executions and some pending Ohio legislation. We have 138 men and 1 woman on death row. We've executed 53, and we have 12 executions scheduled through January of 2016. The next one is scheduled for May of this year. You'll see that there's several bills that have been introduced. We're not really seeing that any of them are going to make their way through passage at this particular time. You can look at that. We've got a couple bills to end the death penalty that were introduced. We've got a bill that would address the race issue, and we had a it did get sponsored testimony was Senator or Representative Hagan's bill that said the governor or the director of prisons needs to actually be present at an execution. I think our best hope is for this Supreme Court task force and their recommendations. And again, we look forward to something happening in April. We do know the legislature will be around. Now they're scheduled that they might be around a little bit into June, and then it would be after November. So we're hoping to at least get some traction so that if not this year, at least next year, that we can get some traction on those recommendations. Resources, again, I repeat, those groups, and I think later on we'll have these slides available. And if you don't have those links to find all of those. The last thing I want to share is the Ohioans to Stop Execution has the People of Faith initiative. We're asking all our different congregations to sign on and help us to move that issue. So with that, I thank you, and I will now turn it over to Tom.
Everyone hear me? I'm Tom Smith with the Ohio Council of Churches and Public Policy Director, and I'm going to talk today about human trafficking. What is human trafficking? It is modern-day slavery. It is the fastest growing criminalized industry in the world. Toledo has become one of the significant origin cities, according to the FBI. A Toledo representative, Teresa Fetter, has become known as the champion for anti-sex trafficking cause in the legislature. Representative Fetter has sponsored House Bill 130 that was passed by the Ohio Representatives 98 to zip last June, with an emergency clause that allows it to go into effect immediately on the signature of the governor. However, it is yet to move in the Ohio Senate. She needs your help by contacting your state senator and asking them to please act quickly and pass this important legislation, protecting young women from becoming another victim of sex trafficking in Ohio. In Ohio, over 1,000 children are presumed trafficked, with over 3,000 at high risk each year. Women and children make up 80% of the sex trafficking. A child is trafficked every 30 seconds somewhere in this country. The average age of a child trafficked into commercial slavery is 13 years old. They're also exploited into pornography, which is a $96 billion industry, and nearly 2 million children worldwide. Is it any wonder that trafficking has grown so fast in Ohio, since until 2012, when Representative Fetter convinced the legislature to pass the Safe Harbor Act, House Bill 262, Ohio was the only state in the Union in which it was not even a felony if traffickers were prosecuted. This made us a sure target for pimps and traffickers. If you have information about possible sex trafficking in your community, contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-2888. House Bill 130 is designed to get tougher on traffickers, increasing the prison time from 6 years to 20 years. It also increases the penalty for soliciting from a misdemeanor to a felony. If the person is less than 18 or is a developmentally disabled person, and knowing that the victim will be subjected to involuntary servitude or for engaging for hire in sexual activity or the production of materials that are obscene or sexually oriented. It also requires a person convicted of soliciting of a child under 18 as a Tier to sex offender, who must register under the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Law. To end sex trafficking, we need to hit the root cause. We need more men to stand up and defend and protect women and children. Ohio senators show the rest of America that Ohio is serious about ending trafficking in our state, and it's time to end the demand. At the same time, victims of trafficking need treatment and legitimate employment, not jail time. Commercial sex and sex trafficking are a demand-driven system initiated by the buyer, or the John, while advocates, lawmakers, and law enforcement concentrate on legal actions to prosecute the pimp and the trafficker. The crime would not exist without the economic demand of the John to support the sex trafficking. According to some estimates, approximately 80% of trafficking involves sexual exploitation, and 19% involves labor exploitation. According to the U.S. State Department, 600,000 to 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders every year. More than 70% are female, and half of those are children. California harbors 3 of the FBI's highest child sex trafficking areas in the nation: Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. The National Human Traffic Hotline receives more calls from Texas than any other state in the U.S. 15% of those calls are from Dallas-Fort Worth area. Human trafficking is the 3rd largest international crime industry, behind illegal drugs and arms trafficking. It reportedly generates a profit of $32 billion every year. Of that number, $15.5 billion is made in industrialized countries. Nicholas Kristof, writer for the New York Times, wrote a column entitled "A Simple Way to Cut Human Trafficking." He writes that the police arrest women for prostitution all the time, but almost never the customer or the John. But he follows that with the statement, "Yet there is a beginning to change. There's a growing awareness that sex trafficking is one of the most serious human rights abuses around, with 100,000 juveniles estimated to be trafficked into the sex trade in the United States each year." Police increasingly recognize that the simplest way to reduce the scale of human trafficking is to arrest men who buy sex. That isn't prudish or sanctimony, but a strategy to dampen demand. Polling suggests that about 15% of American men have bought sex. Donna Hughes, an expert on human trafficking from the University of Rhode Island, notes that police often are tougher on men who download child pornography than on Johns who have sex with girls or women. She said Thomas Dart, the sheriff of Providence, Rhode Island, says the basic problem is that the public doesn't much sympathize with victims of trafficking. He remembers raiding a dog fighting operation to free pit bulls, and soon after raiding a sex trafficking operation to free girls and women sold for sex. There was an outpouring of sympathy for the pit bulls, but some carping about why the department was in the moral business and worrying about sex. As appreciation grows that human trafficking is one of the most serious of human rights abuses, so is the recognition that a starting point in addressing it is to stop making excuses for the men who perpetuate it and start arresting them as well. Here are some more resources. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, we'll open it up to questions.
I'm going to unmute everyone's microphone for questions since there are so few of us. If there are any of the folk online who seem to have some really heavy background noise, I'll let you know, and I'll mute and unmute for you to ask your questions. So let me unmute everyone. Are there any questions for either Tom or Jim?
I'm participating in a webinar right now. And so, can I give you a call back? Or, thanks. This is Howard Tolley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Howard.
I'm sharing with you all the link to a website where there is video of the rally conducted last November 2nd, and those calling for abolition of the death penalty delivered some very powerful messages. Melinda Dawson, who is the vice president of OTSI, and with Murder Victims' Families for Reconciliation, Joe D'Ambrosio, who was wrongly convicted and released after 22 years, and other speakers. You can access that. And Jim, I don't know if you'd want to add that into your resources as something that people might want to check out. I'm doing a service at my church this Sunday. A serial killer and registered sex offender, Anthony Kirkland, killed a 13-year-old member of our congregation 5 years ago. So at the service, I'm going to be showing Melinda Dawson's testimony because her mother was killed and raped. It's a resource that others may want to use.
Thank you, Howard.
Howard has shared that YouTube connection in the chat box for those of you that are online. For those of you that are on phone only, you might go to YouTube and search under UUJO or under Melinda Dawson.
Right. It's a link to the UJO homepage, and it was posted by the ACLU, and it's on one of their sites.
Okay.
And Jim, I do hope we can get your slides. That would be really beneficial. As I'm preparing for Sunday, I want to use a lot of what you shared.
Yeah, not a problem. Joan, we're going to make them available. Is that right?
If you need the slides, I would suggest you contact the Ohio Council of Churches, because I will be out of town beginning at noon today until Monday morning.
I can send them to you, Howard. I got your email. I'll just send them right to you.
Yeah, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to post on our website the links if they're online someplace. Tom, do you think you'll have them available online?
Yeah, I think we can probably put it together.
And Sarah, I do like to publicize in my statewide calendar sent to 300 Unitarians upcoming events. So we have been publicizing the event you had last week, and I just want to keep current on everything that's upcoming for all three of these issue areas.
Well, thank you. I know that there were a good maybe dozen folks from several Unitarian congregations that attended last week, so we really appreciated that support.
Yeah, one of our steering committee members was wearing her yellow shirt, and she said a couple of other Unitarians approached her when they saw her doing that. Ours is a state organization, and so I don't promote as much, Tom, the kinds of national and international campaigns that you described. And we have wrestled with just how much a UU Justice Ohio ought to spend its energies working on national and international campaigns, and my own preference has always been to focus on what's happening in Ohio and what difference we can make in this state.
Well, I think that in the case of the human trafficking, Ohio is right on the top because of the fact that we were so slow in putting a felony in. Toledo became one of the top spots in the country.
Right. Well, as a scholar doing human rights research at the University of Cincinnati, that was the focus of the way I ended my research activities on a visit to the red light district in Mumbai, India. So I'm very concerned about the issue and appreciate all the good work you're doing on that. Jim, there's what you mentioned as the OTSI effort to engage the faith communities. And I've been disappointed at how the organization has become primarily focused on Catholic and mainstream Christian congregations without the kind of engagement we had back when I was on its board that included, in addition to the faith communities, representatives of Amnesty International and the American Civil Liberties Union. I think you need secular partners. And then I'm delighted that OTSI now shows on its website the logo for UU Justice Ohio, which is a non-Christian faith community. But I would hope that we can engage more of the Jewish community, and among the Christian communities, the peace churches, the Friends, they used to have a member on the board, the Mennonites and the Brethren, who are natural allies, and they're doing programs in Cincinnati at this time.
Thanks, Howard.
Okay.
Those are good suggestions. Those groups still remain part of the board, but I can make sure that that this message gets communicated to the board. This is Howard. This is the first time I haven't been on the board, and it's been a year.
Right.
Okay. We had several other people. Are there other participating? Are there other questions from any of the other folk? Okay.
I had a question. This is Lynn. I was working at the same time. I was listening, and I didn't quite catch something about the trafficking legislation. So I thought I heard that we have HB 262 already passed and in effect, but then I also heard we should be contacting our state senators. Nate, did I hear that correctly? And if so, what is it that we should be contacting our state senators about?
At the present time, House Bill 130 has passed the House 98-0, and it's in the Senate Judiciary, and it's been kind of stymied for about 6 months. I think it's beginning to start to move, but any contact we can have to senators to ask them to kind of step on this, get it out this session.
Okay, great, thanks. So it's House Bill 30.
130.
130?
Yes, House Bill 130.
Okay, 130. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Other comments from any of our board or panel people? Sarah, Jim, Tom, any final words?
No, thank you, Joan, for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you.
We
Why
appreciate
don't you introduce yourself, Joan? I don't think you
Oh.
did.
No, not just at the beginning. Joan Van Beesler, and I am the district executive with the Ohio Meadville District of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And this is one of those little technological gifts that we can offer to the larger faith community.
Joan, I really appreciate you doing this and hope there'll be a link to the video audio recording so that we can get others to take advantage of hearing what was been presented and seeing all the reasons.
We are recording. We will create a link, but our district assembly begins tomorrow with pre-meetings, and so myself and all of my staff will be out of town and out of touch till Monday. So I do
Okay.
apologize for that.
Wow, wonderful. That's going to be great to have it online. Thanks.
All right. Then do people want to say goodbye?